What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another stream, little pregame show for us heading into week 4. Little unique, of course, with the game being on Thursday, so we're getting to this a little bit early. Nothing wrong with that, of course. Little recap for you. We did do our recap or reaction stream for week 3. That was last night. So we did kind of break down all the games, how things went, where we'd like to see some improvements. So if you do want to see that, feel free to check back into the channel and catch that one recording. But looking for the news of the day, the UFL and the league has corrected an issue that it had kind of coming into the season. And week 3 was chaotic. Across all these games, when you look at them, Storm Kings coming down to overtime and really a penalty deciding the game. DC Defenders, that was a belt to booty game. Renegades, Aviators, of course, the Coach Ginn information, and then, of course, how the game went and how close it was, chaotic. And then, of course, the Battlehawks coming back and getting that victory against the Stallions. So, really just chaos across the board, but the league has addressed at least one bit of it, and that is the overtime and really the penalty coming into the deciding the game. So to recap we're tied, we go into the end, and ultimately the league does not have like an extra quarter that you play like how it is kind of in college. So on that note, they have a 3 2-point conversion cycle, so it's kind of a shootout. However, if there is no shootout or there is no winner in the shootout or it's still tied, it then goes to a sudden death. And that is really where this all happened because Louisville committed their second defensive penalty of the overtime session, which resulted in a successful 2-point conversion being awarded to the Storm, even though they did not get the ball into the end zone. And people didn't like that. Across every social media platform, the fans let the league know that's not how a football game should end. There's really no point to ending it like that, especially when you're in a primetime game. It's Friday night football, really doing a disservice to the fan base. And ultimately, the league said this will never happen again. We hear you. We are not doing this. Like, we want to provide you that better fan experience. So they're changing it. So instead now of that occurring, you're going to see basically a penalty, if it occurs, will move it half the distance to the goal. And that will continue and continue and continue until ultimately someone scores. So they're not going to decide a winner based on the rule book. They're going to require that touchdown be actually scored. So whether that gets implemented this weekend or this situation ever arises again this season, we'll at least know that the game isn't going to end on a penalty. And that really, I feel like, turned off some of the fans and really got them a little bit frustrated. But ultimately, I understand why. That's not how we end a football game. It's really a disservice to the fan base when a football game ends like that. Looking back, though, at the weekend, a little disappointing, of course, for some of our teams. Kings, still not getting a win. They're 0-3. Very disappointing for them. It came down to that penalty, and you can expect their fan base is going to be fired up about it for a while. Then when we look at Houston, cannot put on a showing like this on national television. Not only does it embarrass the team, it embarrasses the league. So there are a lot of concerns there, and hopefully we don't have to see this DC Gamblers matchup again this season, because if it goes the way this one went, people are just going to turn the game off. But then this game, the Renegades versus the Aviators, really, really impressive. I thought the Aviators might have the chance to pull away on this one. Fortunately, it didn't play out that way, of course, but that was a competitive game. And these last two games were, most of these games, except for the Houston game, were so competitive, and it was just back and forth, and it was amazing to watch. And that's what fans like. They want to see close games, competitive games, things that make you want to watch. And as the season's gone on, we start to see some of our stars rise up. That cream does rise to the top. And ultimately, I think people have really started to enjoy the games. And ultimately, they all really went well for us. So we were lucky as some fans. But to look over kind of our players of the week, our offensive player of the week, Hakeem Butler, 4 receptions, 146, basically $150 in yardage, and then a touchdown. Really contributed a lot to their victory over the Stallions. And without this performance, I don't know they would have won. So City's kind of on his back with that one. But then looking at our defensive player of the week, that will be Derek Roberson. 2 sacks, 5 tackles, and 2 tackles for loss. That's how you impact a game. That's how you change the game. That's how you make sure that your presence is felt. And ultimately, moving forward, teams are going to have to plan around this defense. So that can really give the defenders an opportunity, especially going into some of these closer games against St. Louis, against the Renegades. They're going to need that defense to really make a difference for them. And then looking at our special teams player of the week, not a kicker this time, surprisingly enough, Jaden Sheridan got some returns, got some tackles, really was making his presence felt, even though it was not exactly what you'd hope to see, but he did really quite good job. So players like this is how they get noticed. This is how they start to really stand out. This is how they get their notices, and ultimately great for Jaden. And I hope to see more of him moving forward this season. Then a little recap of kind of where we're at with some of our stats. Passing leaders, compliments of XFL analysts. Really great job on this, pulling this all together. Then looking at passing yards, 763 yards out of Reed. Very, very good. Matt Corral, 685. Pretty close to Jack Plummer there, and then Jason Bean. And what's really surprising here is the difference between these two quarterbacks and these two quarterbacks is very surprising. And the teams themselves also very surprising. The most alarming stat of all is Tamu down here, almost bringing in the bottom. You'd hope to see a better performance out of him, but not always does that happen. Then looking at our touchdowns, of course, Austin Reed up there, Jack Plummer and Matt Corral doing pretty well, and Jason Bean. Jordan Tamu down at the bottom. Again, Tamu is starting to seem like he might be holding the team back, but he's competent under center, and that's really what you need, especially as the season goes on. Rushing yards, Deion Jackson leading the way, of course. Corbin for the Storm also doing well. McFarland, we'd like to see more out of him and Day Hunter. McClendon, for a quarterback, being at 109, kind of impressive. So good on him. Then looking at our receiving yards, Tyler Vaughn's, of course, going to be leading the way. Elijah Badger as well. And Hakeem Butler. So off one game, he got 3/4 of his yards for the season. So I feel we're about to see a big gap between some of these receivers start to form, especially when we get to the ones that are more consistently a part of that offense, like Vaughn's, like Badger, like Rowland, maybe even Butler, based on that performance we saw at him last week. Then reception leader, Vaughn, of course, most yards, most receptions as well. But Rowland kind of lower on the yardage list, but has a lot of receptions. And that's what you want. You want to be able to move your team forward, and catching the ball does that. Couple yards here, couple yards there. They add up at the end. Tay Martin actually has received a lot of made a lot of receptions. Yardage isn't quite there yet. So across the board with the Aviators, they're knocking on the door, but they're not quite there. And then when we look at our tackles, Tay Crowder for the Stallions, and their defense has been a strong point. Not so much last week, at least in the fourth quarter, and then the Kings. The only thing keeping them alive lately has been their defense. So I expect them to kind of continue that on our Thursday night game and kind of moving forward throughout the season. Looking at our sacks, you'll notice two Storm players on here, two Defenders players on here. They may have the two best defenses in the league. They're up there in the top 3 teams in the league, of course. So kind of what you'd expect based on the performance. But turning now to look kind of what everyone's thinking about how the teams are doing. We've got our first power rankings. These are kind of our more official ones from the league. So no change at the top. 3-0 Storm, and then of course right under them we have or right above them we have the Renegades. Not much movement there. There won't be much movement unless one of those teams loses, and I'm unsure that happens this week. It could, of course, but it is, I would say, unlikely. Possibly the Stallions could get a win over the Storm, but I would say it's more than likely, or I mean, there's the chance, of course, that the Renegades do lose, but more than likely they'll get the win, so they'll kind of remain at the top spot. Battlehawks in that number 3 spot. I get it. It was a tough fought win, but how DC's been playing, I do not know how you have them above them. I get it. They played. The Battlehawks won, but I don't know that that exactly justifies that ranking. Stallions under the Gamblers. So this is a question I have. Is the list keeping the Battlehawks above the Defenders because they beat the Defenders? By that same logic, then, the Stallions should be under the Gamblers, and that's not what's happening here. Also, we have the Kings above the Aviators. I do not agree with that one either. They are a sloppy team. The Aviators, also a sloppy team, but not as sloppy. But I would say these two, Kings and Aviators, are going to stay at the bottom as long as they're 0-3. Gamblers, they get another win this week. They might be competing with some of these middle spots, but ultimately I don't foresee too much movement, maybe between the Defenders and the Battlehawks. They'll be playing. And then, of course, the Stallions, depending on how they perform this week, will more than likely stay where they're at. Looking now at our Fox sports rankings, kind of comparing these ones across the board so far this season. So 8th spot for them, they have the Aviators. They also have the Aviators. For the official ones in the number 8 spot, I don't agree with that position on either of these lists. The Aviators, I feel, are a better team than the Kings. We'll see which one pulls it together, but ultimately, look at the odds to win the title. Who's got better odds? Exactly. Kings, I would say, are a little bit worse. But, they were closer to winning their game than the Aviators were. But the Aviators were also playing the best team in the league. And the fact they did that good, to have them in the last spot in these power rankings, I think is disrespectful. But that's just me. Then, of course, our Louisville Kings. In the 7th spot, you know how I feel about this. We'll just kind of move on from that. 6th spot for the Stallions. Now, I agree with this. This is not where the Gamblers should be. The Stallions should be below the Gamblers, given the beat them. They did beat them. Gamblers sitting with 5,500 odds to win the championship. It is unlikely, though the Stallions in that 6th spot do have 800. So is that a temporary replacement, or are they expecting them to continue? Because Vegas clearly isn't expecting them to continue being so bad. But if the Gamblers go on a run, it might be the most surprising sports comeback in sports history. Then our 4th spot, we've got the Defenders. I would say I agree with this. To a degree, I think the Battlehawks should be under it. So I would switch these two. But looking at our odds to win here, we got plus 225 out of the Defenders, 600 out of the Battlehawks. Yeah, how are we having this 3 and 4 jockling that we've got on the official and on the Fox Sports rankings? And then, of course, our top, Orlando Storm, and then the Dallas Renegades. No changes there. Best team in the UFL. That is exactly how they are. And when you look at the Storm, there are a lot of questions for them as well. But let's look at our ESPN rankings. These ones are kind of coming every 2 weeks, so we're just kind of catching them on the back burner. Our number 1 spot, of course, with the Renegades, no surprise there. That's going to be consistent. Now, finally, someone that I agree with. ESPN, tell me. Number 2 spot, those DC Defenders. You can't get it wrong. Matt Willis, sir, you are quite correct. They're looking like the most competitive team in spring football. And we won't know until they play the Renegades. But ultimately, I think this 2 spot is the most justified position yet for them this season. Then looking at the Storm, they're in the number 3 spot. I'd take that. I think that's fair. I do. They've been a good team. And then we have 4 spot being the Battlehawks. This might be the most agreeable power rankings we've seen out of for week 3, at least for me. But if you guys disagree, feel free to let me know, and we'll circle back a little bit later. But looking at the Battlehawks in that 4 spot, I'd say quite justified. Stallions in the 5 spot. I like that positioning. I do, especially with the Battlehawks just beating them. Kings in the 6 spots, and then the Aviators in the 7 spot. Okay, so these last 3 we're clearly going to have some questions on. So the Kings in the 3 spot, I can get it. I still would like the Aviators potentially up there. And the Gamblers, they are bad, don't get me wrong. But Nolan Henderson, Hunter Deckers, they can play the game and they can win in a lot of games. But Talia really struggling. So as Talia's in, I can justify an 8 placement for the Gamblers, but this 7 spot for the Aviators, I do not think that's justified. Um, the Aviators did get a little smoked by the defenders, but ultimately not as bad as the um, Gamblers did. And how they performed against the Renegades, I think, says more about that team than anything else. But now let's turn ahead, look at our upcoming games. So our first game of the week is this Thursday night football, the first one of the UFL, and that's going to be on NFL Network. Surprising, I'm not the biggest fan of the NFL Network games. It's a low, not very watched network, and ultimately but at the same time, it's better than being on an app or a streaming device. So I'd much rather it be on the NFL Network than anything else. But I am interested to see how this game goes. Odds are is the Kings get their first win because Talia has really struggled in spring football so far. Maybe he turns it around this week. Maybe the Kings enable that. But I would not be surprised if things don't go well for the Gamblers. Then looking at our Friday night football games, kind of getting some back-to-back night football game, which is good. We like primetime action. So Dallas, they are going to. So this is just like how the the Kings and Storm played back-to-back. Renegades and Aviators are doing the same thing. I do not like that, but what can we say? And honestly, I think the Aviators would much rather have it this way because they almost won last week, and to come back this week, they might be able to really, take an edge in the game. Then our 12:30 game. So I think this game I would much rather have at night, but of course, DC playing the Battlehawks. No better game in spring football. I'll say it right now, and I expect that game to be massive, especially with how these two teams have been playing. And then our final game of the weekend going to be the Storm at Birmingham. This is where I think the Storm takes their first loss of the season. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen here. But that is really riding on how the team plays. How does AJ McCarron get his team together? How competitive do they look when game time starts? Because last week, there was questions about that team, a lot of questions. But looking at kind of what we have ahead for our games, of course, we got that Thursday night football game, going to be a really exciting game. We'll circle back and look at some of the stuff they got going on for it. Friday night football, going to be a decent game. If the Aviators do as well as they did last week, this will be possibly the best game of the week. If they show up how they showed up in week 1 and week 2, it's going to be a tough game for them, especially in prime time. Then looking at our Saturday starter, that's our game of the week, of course. Like I said, best matchup in spring football always is, and I only expect that to continue. And then our Saturday second, it's going to be Birmingham and the Storm. We'll see how that goes for all of them, but should be a good weekend of football for us all. So I'm excited. I think everyone is, especially after that crazy week 3 action. But looking at the game, kind of some of those key players, we got Chandler Rogers, Jason Bean. I expect Jason Bean to get a lot more of the attention today. Then when we look at the Gamblers, Nolan Henderson might take a snap. I think it's unlikely. So it'll be Talia in there again. Not great. But ultimately, both of these teams are looking to bounce back. They both had tough weeks last week. And while the Kings need a win, the Gamblers need one just as bad. So it'll be interesting to see who kind of plays harder this week. And it'll be interesting to see Shell Energy Stadium as well. It did look pretty good last time there was a home game, but I wonder how many people are turning out, especially for a Thursday night game. And it feels like it may have snuck up on some people, but I'm sure the local promotion's been pretty high. Then Renegades, Aviators, we know our key players. It's going to be Austin Reed, Jalen McClendon, Tyler Vaughn, and then Tay Martin. It's going to go back to back to back to back. It's going to be just like last week, and they are going to be slugging it out. And let's see who cleaned it up, because if we do see McClendon and the Aviators clean up that offense and they can get some more points on the board, we're in for a very, very good game of football. Then Battlehawks visiting the Defenders. So this is the thing. They lose this game, I'm not surprised, because if this matchup is in St. Louis, it's tough to say exactly who's going to win. Brandon Silvers, we'll see how it goes. There are some questions there, of course, for me. A couple interceptions, but we'll see how it goes because he is playing against Tamu. Also throws a couple interceptions, so it could be an even match. But if the UFL is smart, they really, really push this game because this could be a great, great day of football for everyone on this doubleheader on Saturday. Then our Orlando Storm, Jack Plummer, Chris Rowland, Elijah Badger, they're really going to be the names to watch. They're going to score some points, and it'll be a good time. And then Matt Corral, Justin Ross, Jadon Mickens, Dion Kane, all of which this is going to be a very pass-heavy game, I feel. We'll see some rushing, but it's going to come down to coaching. I think Coach Beck versus AJ McCarron, this is the matchup. This is the rematch. This is the payback. A lot of people have been thinking that someone's going to want to get, especially with how things went in St. Louis. You had Coach Beck shipping off or trying to ship off AJ McCarron. AJ McCarron says, nah, dude, I'm retiring. I'm not about this business. And then it really became a public spat. And it was some of the more drama centered news from across the league, which ultimately I think there's still some bad blood there. So there's some good storylines here, just like last week. You know, that was his team, his former team. This is his former coach. So I'm sure he's looking to get some payback. So if the Storm are going to lose, I feel like they have a very good chance of losing against AJ McCarron. And if they do get that win, that could really turn around the Stallions season and really keep them in the running kind of for the playoffs, for the championship as well. Because right now the Storm, Renegades, and Defenders are kind of running away with it, and it's really just a battle for that 4 spot. But, you know, never too late. Never too late. So, lots of opportunity ahead for them. Looking at our Thursday night game, this is really an exciting one for us. Both of these teams need a win. They're both going to be playing hard. I'm quite excited, though I do have questions because Kings are going to win if Talia does not play well. If Talia plays well, Kings are probably going to lose. But they know how to win. They basically won the game last week. They just came down to those penalties, which are not going to affect them this week. So I'm excited, and if the Kings can get their first win, it really will be a lot because that could turn around their season. It could really get everyone in the locker room thinking right. But what about this? Tonight, 7 p.m. Get it if you show up to the game. We got $2 beers, $10 student tickets, free T-shirt for the first 5,000 fans. Great time. We'll see how many people take advantage of that. Only 4,000 views, so a little worrisome. But if that happens, I know I'd show up. $2 beers? Come on now. If I'm in Houston, that's where I'm spending my Thursday night getting some bevies in. $2 bevs? Come on. How can you not? But looking ahead now and just taking a peek at kind of the odds for the weekend. Our Thursday night game, we got a 142, 170. So Vegas thinks Kings are going to win. I think that can happen. It's really how Talia plays. And then the Kings could easily walk away with their first win this week. Then our Friday night football game, I think this line is I think this line is too large. I think this should be a lot closer game, especially after last week. I agree with the 218 to 180. That spread's pretty good. I think that's fair. I do think that's fair. Storm versus Stallions might be the closest game of the week. So I would say this is probably one of our more exciting games to watch. But turning now, I did want to look into a little more, just kind of check out what we can expect for some of the players and how things are coming along that way. So line spread is about 3. So Kings are given 3. I probably take the 3 over under 45. Probably going to take that as well. Over under 45. Yeah, I'm going to take the I'd take the under. Definitely taking the under, especially with how Houston's offense is. Some touchdown scores. James Robinson has the best odds, and I think I don't know. Lucky Jackson, I think, gets his first one. Isaiah Winstead probably gets one as well. He's at 125. Not bad, not bad. Then we kind of look over. Let's check out our line for passing. Sitting at about 250 or 275, so over under. I'm taking Jason Bean at the. Probably taking him under 275. Then we look at our receiving props. Justin Hall over 100. I'm taking the under. Lucky for 75. I'm taking the under. Rushing. Jalen White for 80. I'm taking the under. Benny Snell for 80. I'm taking the under. But if we look now at our next game, the Renegades, so we've got a spread about 5.5. Renegades given 5.5. I'd probably take that 5.5 over under 47. I'd take the over. Tud score best odds are sitting at Day. I'd take Day for one at least. Probably take Jalen McClendon for one as well. And looking at her passing, Austin Reed's at 300. I take the under on that. Jalen McClendon at 275. I'm taking the under on McClendon as well. And receiving, Vaughn's for 150. I'm taking the under on that for sure. And then Tay Martin, 100. Taking the under on that as well. These lines, I get it. It could happen. It certainly could happen, but we don't know that it will. Day Hunter for 80 rushing. I'd probably take it. Toa for 80 rushing. I'm taking the under. Definitely taking the under on that one. Then looking at our Battlehawks versus our DC Defenders. 4.5. DC's given 4.5. I'd take DC at the 4.5 at least. And let's see what we have. They don't have the players out yet. Over unders 44. I'm taking the over for sure. We'll see exactly what comes out of this later on this weekend. And then looking at our final game, Storm versus the Stallions. We've got 2.5. Stallions are given 2.5. That's actually surprising. I think I'm taking the Storm at 2.5 for sure. Then we got the over under being 45. I'd take the over. I'd take the over for sure. I think I feel like that'll happen. Definitely. And then percent of bets. So looking at the percentage wise for bets coming in so far, 55%. So we got a lot of Birmingham money. And then the Storm, 45. Not bad. Interesting distribution. Let's see what tonight's games got for us. They do not show it. So, well, that's what we got. Final thing for us today, I wanted to give us Monday's headline today, of course. So we got a good one, a bad one, you know how it goes. So our good one, Aviators fly away on the Renegades. So it could happen. The Renegades could lose to the Aviators. I understand they have a large line there. But Aviators could win. It's very possible. If it happens, that's going to say so much about that team that I'm really interested to see what the future holds, and especially for the fan base, that could get them reinvigorated as well. Then looking at our bad headlines, I'm unsure if this will happen, but the Kings still winless. So the Gamblers... So the Kings gambled away their chance at a winnings is pretty much what the headline is. And the Kings could very, very well lose. It really is going to be riding on the Gamblers quarterback. Their main talent is out. Tolly is going to be taking a lot of the snaps tonight. And depending on he does, that's really going to determine how this game goes for the league. But ultimately, one note I will add with the Thursday night, possibly trying to make a package to bring another broadcaster to the fold. I would not be surprised if we see, because there's going to be another Thursday night game. It'll be interesting what happens, because if we start to see Thursday become a stronger product, is this kind of what our weekends are going to look like more? But what I will say is we need to get consistent scheduling. You know, football Sunday is a football day, and I'd like to see the league really lean into that more often. And we need more consistent scheduling because so far the only consistent part about the schedule, at least for the fan, has been that Friday night football. And it's the premier product of the league. They're keeping it going quite well. But we need to see some more stability in the weekend. We're all over the place. People are missing the games. They don't know when they're being played. And that really comes back to consistency, something the league needs to get back to. But with that, we got an awesome week of football ahead of us. So I look forward to not only the games ahead, but what you all have to say about it. So thank you for joining us today for this pregame. Might have a little nightcap for us later tonight, depending on how the game goes, of course. So if not, we'll be back at you with an overreaction either Monday or Tuesday, and then a look ahead at the games in week 5. And ultimately, we should have our performance period coming out sometime soon-ish. We have got 3 weeks in the book, and I'll get that going soon. Just a reminder, next week we'll have my power rankings coming out. But we'll wait till then. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great weekend, and please, by all means, enjoy the football ahead. Thanks again for joining. Bye now.